In the 1600s, Scotland held around 4,000 to 6,000 witch trials, most leading to execution. The church always believed witches to be a part of folklore until the passing of the Witchcraft Act in 1563.
This made anyone practicing witchcraft or associating with witches guilty of a capital offence. The Act caused a drastic change to the way that witches were trialled in Scotland.
After Mary Queen of Scots was executed, her son James VI of England became king. James began to write books on how to hunt a witch and demonology.
This not only led to paranoia from Britain's people, but they also began to use these books as guides to hunt down witches, and the church to accuse any witch of being hand in hand with Satan himself. Now, Scotland's towns and villages all had their separate ways of trialling a witch, but I'm going to focus on one town in particular, Elgin. Elgin executed around 40 people for witchcraft. They had 3 stages within their trials, starting here at Elgin Cathedral.
Those accused of witchcraft were taken from their home and dragged down this road by horse and cart to the cathedral gates, where their crimes would be read out to the public and members of the church. After this, they would be taken to be tested by water.
If you survived, you were accused of being a witch and taken back to the cathedral to be hanged. But what truly made people a witch? And how did this affect Elgin? I asked Linda Dean from Elgin Ghost Tours to find out more.
I'm Linda Dean. I'm the owner-operator of Elgin Ghost Tours. And with the Witches Tour, I take people along the trail that you would have followed if you were an accused witch to your trial and go through some of the things that would have happened as part of your trial. And to try and raise awareness that Salem is not the only one that had lots of people dead, because Salem had less people dead than we did in Elgin. Automatically I would like to say the bishop, but this is after the Reformation, so technically it wouldn't really be the bishop, but it would be the higher ranking members of the local churches. Because it's after the time the cathedral is shut down, it will be the higher ranking members of the St Giles Church. We look at some of the ways that they would try and discover that you're a witch by getting you to answer particular questions. If they think they have enough evidence, they will take you prisoner anyway, and you will be stripped and checked, and then they would subject you to other things. The stripping and checking is when they get the witch pricker in to examine any moles and things that you might have to see if they are proper witch marks. A lot of the people who were executed that were from Elgin tended to be the folk who lived on the edge of the woodlands, the ones who purposely stayed away from people. So being a hermit isn't going to save you. You would probably still wind up being accused of witchcraft, especially because you are a hermit. But more often than not, it was the poorer end of the local community. So the folk that really are struggling to feed their family and feed themselves would more than likely be the ones that ended up. There is some cases where it might be somebody who had a very productive farm that made them a lot of money. And of course, jealousy is brought into the equation then, and then you would be accused so that they could basically get their hands on your land. What's there nowadays is Moycroft Industrial Estate, across the road from Burger King on the A96. That's where they would have done the executions for the witch trials. The bulk of it would have been done there. For some of them, they were taken back to the gates of Elgin Cathedral for the execution there. But the majority of them, because it's outside the town, probably would have been killed at the side of the Order Pot, which is now Moycroft Industrial Estate. Very, very much the paranoia, anybody that's different. So you might be the only one with black hair, the only one with curly hair or straight hair. Just something that makes you different from the majority of the local population would get you pulled out as a witch. And then as they start quizzing you and basically torturing you to give a confession, that obviously gives them more evidence to kill you. It did lead on to, well, 8 out of the 10 people we've just killed as witches all have black hair, or more accurately, all have red hair. Because a lot of the red-headed people were picked out as witches, and there were, per head of population, there was more redheads killed than brunette or blonde. So like say, just because there are less redheads than brunette and blonde, there was a higher percentage of the redheads were killed just because they were redheads. And if you had red hair and green eyes, forget it, you're dead. Nowadays, I very much equate the witch trials to normal everyday bullying, which is a really horrible thing to have to say, that bullying is a normal everyday thing, but we know it is. Because it was anything that made you different. Now you think of when you were at school, you maybe didn't have as much money, so you didn't have the cool fancy trainers everybody else has got. That gets you singled out, pointed out. And it's the same kind of thing. It's anything that made you different would get you singled out to be a witch. And since the passing of the pardon, not that it would make much difference to the folk that were killed, but the fact that they've all been pardoned, it's brought it back to the forefront of people's minds. So and I think that's why people want to do the Witches Tour, because it's been brought to the forefront.
The last witch to be trialled was Maggie McPherson, an 84-year-old healer who lived outside of town. Because of her age, Maggie's execution lasted even longer than those before her. A minister stood up to defend Maggie, although this backfired and he too was accused of witchcraft. If you defend a witch, you were a witch.
Maggie's trial had turned the stomachs of Elgin's people, and for the remainder of the witch trials, those accused of witchcraft only had to attend church and plead forgiveness. This stone holds remembrance to those accused of witchcraft and the horrific ordeals that they had to go through just because they were different.
But do we still judge people because they are different than us? Should we take more time before we stereotype people into groups and see them as outcasts? Maybe we need to take more thought before we execute modern-day witch hunts.